The next person is Merle McGee, whenever you're ready.
Hello, everyone. My name is Merle McGee. I am the Chief Equity and Engagement Officer for Planned Parenthood of Greater New York, PPGNY, and I'd like to thank you all for allowing us to address the entire community board about reviewing our application to remove Margaret Sanger's name from Margaret Sanger Square at the intersection of Mott and Bleecker Streets that sit and outside of our Manhattan centers. For more than 100 years, Planned Parenthood has been a trusted provider of sexual and reproductive health, care, and education programs for communities throughout New York City. And as a part of that work, we need to acknowledge, like many institutions, that we have to reckon with our history and our founder's legacy. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was a champion for birth control, which expanded bodily autonomy for many, including women of color. But Margaret Sanger also embraced eugenics, which was an ableist and racist philosophy to advance the birth control campaign. And her championing the eugenics movement has harmed communities of color, working class communities, and peoples with disabilities because she legitimized the eugenics proponents' belief in who was valuable and who was valued in our society. Her actions, some 100 years on, continue to be weaponized by anti-abortion extremists and opponents that you see outside of our health center every day. And so the removal of Margaret Sanger's name from the intersection is a decision that we've made as a part of our reckoning with Sanger's legacy and the removal of from the Manhattan Health Center last summer. This is an important way to address our past and work towards becoming an anti-racist organization. We've done this through a long process of our Reviving Radical initiative, which is designed to have overdue conversations and transform our relationships with communities of color. So this work has been in the decades.
I have to ask you to wrap it up, please.
Surely. And so that we recognize and appreciate that we are submitting an application to remove her name and look to work with you all to rename that square in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Darlene, whenever you're ready. I'm sorry, my mistake, I forgot to look. We have hands up. Michael, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you please remind us of the exact location of the current signage? And is there only one location or is there more than one corner?
One location at the corner of Mott and Bleecker Street.
Okay, thank you.
Rocio?
Can you please tell us how long the existing sign has been there?
Since the 1990s, I believe.
1990s. This community board agreed to have the sign posted then.
Okay, next, Cormac. We can't hear you, Cormac. You're muted.
Hello, sorry. I just want to ask, I mean, you are aware in these internal discussions that many of the statements that you just made about Margaret Sanger are in fact highly controversial. A number of historians, respectable and eminent historians, have debunked some of these things and have, demonstrated with some fair degree of detail that, the connection of Margaret Sanger to eugenics is vastly inflated, and that, is it not possible that Planned Parenthood here is embracing a kind of romantic myth of the past rather than the historic truth about Margaret Sanger and her relationship with eugenics?
Was that a question or a comment?
It is a question. Have you considered that or reflected upon that?
Absolutely. We have considered and reflected and have done our own research, and we are following the lead of our federation, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, to also reckon with Margaret Sanger's legacy, which in fact is documented in several records, including records by folks who are supportive of Margaret Sanger's legacy, that in fact she was a proponent and spoke openly about her support for eugenics as a part of her anti-immigrant and anti-disabled people views and opinions. And those things can be documented and record and looked at in the Margaret Sanger project that is based at New York University, as well as Dr. Dorothy Roberts' Killing the Black Body, as well as Dr. Angela Davis's book, Women, Race, Class, and Gender. And so there are plenty of texts that actually clearly outline the state and the facts of Margaret Sanger's participation and support for the eugenics movement.
Okay. Shirley had her hand up. Secunda?
Yeah, I'd just like to address Rocio's comment, and I'll just read you a little bit from our resolution, which says that and we know that CB2's current street co-naming guidelines require any person proposed for a co-naming or unnaming, I guess, but co-naming to have contributed in some extraordinary way to the welfare of the block and or the community with a consistent voluntary commitment and dedication to improving community conditions, and who have contributed to the CBT to community alone. And Margaret Sanger, being a national and international figure, would not meet the current co-naming requirements. It did meet the co-naming requirements back in the 90s, Rocio, but it doesn't now.
Thank you. Betty, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, in addition to what is obviously very important of acknowledging Margaret Sanger's legacy and removing her name, but is, albeit a sort of perhaps more superficial measure, I was wondering if you could briefly touch on what other anti-racist measures Planned Parenthood nationally and locally has been taking to address Margaret Sanger's legacy, but also just work within the organization itself.
Certainly. So Planned Parenthood, beginning in 2016, began to attempt to reckon with Margaret Sanger's legacy, and folks were left feeling underwhelmed by the effort at the time. Since the 2018, our affiliate, Planned Parenthood of Greater New York, has launched specific equity-related focused activities to address both internal and external equity issues. This is related to care, this is related to staffing, to pay parity, equity, as well as learning and engaging in becoming an anti-racist organization. We are leading that charge with the Federation, and the Federation has come along with us. As you all know, Alexis McGill Johnson made a public statement and an op-ed in the New York Times, beginning the reckoning with Margaret Sanger's legacy as a national institution. I am proud to say that we even have the support of Judson Memorial Church, who are huge proponents of Margaret Sanger's legacy as one of the institutions that were in support of her work. And the Reverend Trapper there wrote an op-ed actually explaining why she supports our position as well. It is past time that we reckon with our history as an institution, and we reckon as a nation with our legacy of institutional, structural, and systemic racism, ableism. And this is our place, and this is our moment to step into that work and show up for communities of color in the way that this institution has not in its 100+ years.
Thank you. Susan Wittenberg?
I just wanted to say that I'm 100% in support of the Planned Parenthood proposal, and I agree 100% of their accuracy, and I think what they're doing is incredibly important. I would hope we support them.
Thank you. Keen? Keen, you're muted.
Yes, here I am. I am now the head of the board of Judson Memorial Church. I'm glad you mentioned us. We had a sermon a few weeks ago, which had Linda Gordon, who wrote The Second Coming of the KKK, who's a noted historian who is a member of our church. And also Donna Scarborough spoke exactly on this. So we are so happy and strong on this very issue. And thank you for mentioning us.
Thank you. Georgia?
Hi. Oh, let me see. Hi. I support Planned Parenthood's petition, and I would hope that Community Board 2 members would not try to parse out how racist someone is. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to just jump in here and just remind people that if you have questions of the speakers, please ask them, but we will discuss the resolutions in business session.
Okay, and we have Ritu. Oh, Ritu, is your hand still up?
No, I'm just gonna lower it for time.
Okay, thank you. And Michael.
Yes, one more question. To do a street co-naming today, we need the concurrence of the neighbors surrounding the location. Can you tell us if you have written comments, if you have a petition, if you have signatures of the adjacent neighbors who would agree with removing the co-naming?
Yes, indeed. And thank you for asking the question. We do have a petition. We did submit those documents along with the comments to the Community Board Transportation Committee. And so we have overwhelming support, I believe over 200 signatures on that petition.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more speakers, let's go to our next public speaker, which is Darlene Lutz, speaking also on the same subject.
Hi, good evening to everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm here to speak on the Traffic and Transportations Committee, item number 2, the removal of Margaret Sanger Square tribute signage from Mott and Bleecker Streets. This tribute signage was approved by unanimous consent, by near unanimous consent by this board in 1992, nearly 30 years after Sanger's death. In that resolution, it's factually stated, Margaret Sanger was a pioneer in promoting and fighting for reproductive freedom for women. With all due respect, the 2021 resolution as written is an embarrassment to this community and should be rejected and withdrawn. The application presented to the community declared without fact, truth, or context, Margaret Sanger, and I quote, supported the racist ideology of eugenics. For some context to understand the complexities of a 100-year-old scientific theory, the first eugenics laws were enacted because of white men masturbating. Margaret Sanger was a prolific writer. Her collective works in the NYU archive are online, and having read a vast amount of them in the recent weeks, it is obvious she was in no way a racist. She enjoyed the respect and support of the most prominent African Americans of her day, including the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's appalling that Planned Parenthood believes that joining in on the demonization of their founder and rebranding themselves will somehow satisfy the right-wing extremists. Ted Cruz whining about racism to remove Sanger's statuary from the Smithsonian was recently rejected. Historians are sticking to the facts. We all want social and reproductive justice. We just don't need to lie to get it. Margaret Sanger was one of the greatest humanitarians of the 20th century, and that is an indisputable fact. Thank you.